Patricia, thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah. Excited to be here.
Can I take you back to when you were a child? What did you want to be when you were growing up?
I love that. It's interesting that you asked that question because I think I always wanted to be a psychologist. I was
Okay.
always like fascinated with the mind and how people thought, and I was always really inquisitive from the time I was young. So, I don't know that I've reflected on that question in a while, but I think I always wanted to be a psychologist.
How was that born out as, say, like a 5 or a 6-year old?
You know, um, I used to have imaginary friends in my bedroom, and now I've come to understand that they really weren't imaginary. They were on the other side of the veil, and I had the opportunity to really see spirits and auras from a really young age. And I think that that just became really fascinating for me, that the veil between these two worlds was always quite thin. And so I was always such a seeker and just curious about life and human behavior.
Wow. So I'm sure this is a bit crude, but you could see ghosts and spirits, is it?
I don't call them ghosts because I believe that they were here on Earth at one time, but I could see spirits, yes.
Wow. A- And you thought at the time that they were imaginary friends?
Yeah, I don't think I really had context around it. I mean, in our house, we weren't really talking about ghosts. I mean, actually, now that I'm saying it, I'm thinking about it. And my mom actually would talk about spirits on the other side a little bit, but it wasn't as woo woo as like you would think today, but more that, she would talk about talking to her loved ones on the other
Yeah.
side and things like that, but not like in the physical aspect of actually being able to see them and communicate with them. I didn't realize until probably my late 30s that I actually had a gift to communicate with souls on the other side of the veil.
And what did your real friends think of this?
I don't know that I don't know that I was having tea parties with my young friends at the time and like, hey, come talk to my imaginary friends. I think that was something that was just private for me, typically at night. I don't know that I really was communicating with other, and I don't think when I was younger, I really understood
Yeah, of
exactly what
course.
was going on until I got older. And it was interesting. I moved into a house that in the middle of the night, I would have these spirits come and talk to me. And I was like, what is happening here? And it was then that I really started to do a deep dive into understanding and working with souls on another or in another dimension. And it was then that it really propelled me into a 2-year shamanic study of learning shamanism and understanding what was happening in a really creative and thoughtful way. Yeah, it's funny. I haven't gone down this avenue, so you're the
Yeah.
first one to capture this interview.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah,
Um, what is shaman or shamanic?
shamanic. Uh-huh.
What is that?
So shamanism, and forgive me, I probably won't do it justice here, but shamanism has been around for centuries through indigenous cultures. And it's a practice of really working with, for me anyway, the energetic field of someone's body, and to be able to work with their soul and clear, energetic hooks from other people or past lives, etc. And also to be able to do healing practices on someone who might be going through a mental health, emotional, physical, spiritual experience where they need some facilitation and support with.
Wow. So you're able to help somebody's mental health by, I suppose, contacting the spirits or using a spiritual dimension to it.
Yeah, I would say it's not so much about calling on the spirits when you're working with someone's mental health and things like that, but it is working with their energy field. I think that we have experiences from our childhood or adverse experiences in our adult life that can leave energetic blueprints. Let's just say, by way of example, you got into a car accident and it changes the way your body responds while being in traffic. And so to go and heal some of those energetic prints that got
Okay.
left can help clear your body to no longer have those triggers that you might be experiencing when you're in traffic again after having gone through a car accident. Or if you had a loved one that was really ill and was in the hospital for a period of time, every time you walk into a hospital, you have a sense or felt sense of that trauma of when you were there, and to go back and kind of rewire those experiences so you don't have the same reaction to them. And that's kind of, for me, working with the energetic aspect of our earthly experience, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you think everybody has that potential, or is it just, say yourself and, I would say, chosen people, but specific
Yeah.
people?
I think that we all are born psychic. I think it's something that each and every one of us has access to. And then I believe through, the culture that we're raised in, parenting, etc., I think we start to dumb that down, and then, a lot of people in their adult lives, drugs and alcohol and some of these other things can mute our psychic abilities. And so I think there's a lot of interventions that can be used to really heighten you could also exchange psychic with intuition, right? How often have you thought about someone and then instantly they called the next day? Or, you're thinking about something and it magically appears in front of you, or you're thinking about a book and you go to a cafe and someone's left the book there. I mean, it's the same thing of playing in that energetic field. And I think we all have it. I think you have to be conscious and aware of it. And then also tune into that radio station that allows that to be part of your process, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm curious for you, does it make sense to you, or are you kind of like,
Yeah.
wow,
So,
that's really out there?
so the question I was going to ask was, when does it stop being a coincidence and become something more psychic? So, like, yes, that example of you're thinking about somebody and then they appear, I definitely have had that experience, but I would go, well, that was just a coincidence. Or
I think it loses the clone of coincidence when you actually label it for what I believe it to be, which is our internal intuition and psychic abilities. And we all have it. I think the more that you focus on it and the more that you refine and hone that skill that we all have, the more intense it'll become and the easier it will be to tap into those dimensions.
yeah,
So,
yeah, it's
yeah.
fascinating. So, like, we're not going to spend the whole time talking about this, but I think it is quite interesting. If there was, say, one thing that I could do to try and hone that psychic ability, what would you say, like, as a beginner?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is returning to nature and spending time in nature, eating whole nutrient dense foods, staying away from substances, alcohol. It's been said in cultures that beef and pork can block your vision. So staying away from those substances or those, particular, not forever, but just for a period of time while you work on it. And then I think sitting in meditation and the quiet in nature are huge starts. And then being aware of the signs. I think so many people just completely negate it. Like you said, oh, that was a coincidence that
Mm,
so and so called, as opposed to, hey, universe, I recognize that just happened. because energetically I called that person into my field and I'm going to pay more attention. Will you show me more clear signs? And then all of a sudden you start to witness these signs. I also work in the psychedelic space. So psychedelics are a clear conduit for me to access those on the other side as well.
Okay, we're keeping going down this rabbit hole. I don't care.
Okay,
so
good.
what? Tell me about psychedelics. What are they?
So psychedelics are indigenous medicines that have been used for centuries to heal a variety of illnesses. I've worked with them specifically for mental health issues. As of late, I had a traumatic brain injury and started working with them to actually heal a traumatic brain injury. But through psychedelics, it kind of thins the veil to the other side. So we have the opportunity at times to commune with our loved ones that have passed on. Unfortunately, I've lost two sisters. And so through psychedelic medicines, I'm able to communicate with them on the other side, which is really powerful.
Yeah.
But psychedelics can be used for a myriad of things. And now it's kind of, of late, we're in the middle of the psychedelic renaissance and it's gained momentum for mental health, depression, anxiety, OCD, major depressive disorder, etc. And we're seeing just astounding results with the use of psychedelic medicines.
Wow. How do they differ to, say, drugs and alcohol then, as we should stay away from toxins like drugs and alcohol, but we should use psychedelics to help, say, I wouldn't say cure, but to improve a brain injury or whatever the case is.
Yeah, or mental health. Well, I think there's a big distinction around set and setting. And what I mean by that is, when I work with these indigenous medicines and psychedelics, let's say mushrooms by way of example, they're used ceremonially in a way to prepare the participant to really drop into using them in a way that's really meaningful. And so I think the difference with drugs and alcohol is that you're out in a party scene, you're drinking, you're becoming unconscious, not more conscious.
Okay.
And so with these indigenous medicines, we often use them to become more conscious of our life and amplify our self-awareness. And to me, I believe through self-awareness, that's really where healing takes place.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever played with psychedelic medicines?
No,
do you mind saying?
No. I've barely strayed away from alcohol.
Wow.
Yeah. I think I'd be terrified.
Yeah, I hear
But
that.
I think it's what you were saying there about doing something in a party scene as opposed to doing something in a controlled and inverted commas environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be completely different, and the outcome sounds like it would be very different.
Yeah.
Much more memorable, I'm sure.
Mm.
But yeah, I suppose it is that cultural thing that I suppose I've certainly grown up to be suspicious of anybody who says they can talk to people on the other side or use anything that can I don't know, like that's a medium for that.
Yeah.
I presume you encounter that skepticism a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's varying degrees of spirituality, and I think that we all have unique and defined gifts. I could tell you a really wild story about this, but I don't know if we want to further go down the rabbit hole. But
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
happy
The
to.
wilder the better.
I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't really think
if
that
you're
we
comfortable
would
with it, I'm comfortable.
Cool. Well, let's do it. So, I was on retreat in Sedona, Arizona, and it was with a woman who is a spiritual teacher, so to speak. And in the middle of this retreat, she starts kind of doing this gesture of like, shoo, 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 And finally she says, there's someone who wants to come through my channel and into my body and speak. And so she starts channeling this woman, and there's several clear distinctions. I'm here to wish Michael a happy birthday. I'm, all of these things. And then all of a sudden she says, Patricia, she's here for you. And come to find out, it was my private chef who had tragically passed away a year or so earlier. And so I had this recording of this experience, and I tracked down her husband and I sent it to her husband. And he listened to the recording and he said, I have to tell you, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in spirits. I don't believe in the afterlife. I don't believe in any of this shit. There is no way that she was not speaking to my wife. And he said, what day did this happen? And I said, it was September 17th. And he said, that was my birthday. His name is Michael. And there were a myriad of identifying points that could not be confused or disputed, that were very specific to his life. And in that moment, he was like, wow, this is coming from someone who is almost an atheist to now all of a sudden believing in past lives in the spirit realm and being able to communicate with his deceased wife. It's just one of the many experiences that I've had in this realm.
Wow. I've never had that experience, but I'm sure if you do have that experience, it'd be very hard not to believe.
Yeah. Have you ever had, let me ask you this, because I think it would be unique for the listener. Have you ever had an experience where, let's say you're walking down the street and all of a sudden you get chills running up the back of your spine?
The weather is very changeable in Dublin, so that
okay, fair enough.
Yeah, no. To answer seriously, I don't think so. It's not. But then, to your point, like around being conscious of,
the
amount of times you're walking down the street and you've got a podcast on or you're listening to music.
Yeah.
And the only thing you're actively doing is actually walking. You're not really conscious of anything else that's going on.
Yeah. So the way that I look at it is the way my body will respond through sensations when I know there's something else happening out there. So let's say I'm walking down the street and there could be danger or someone walking, and my body will respond with chills. And I've heard this from a lot of other people. Or if someone says something that just lands and sears to my core as truth, I can feel that my body will respond with goosebumps. And I kind of liken it in the same way, right? Where have you ever had a conversation with someone and you're like, ooh, that gives me chills all over my body? Because there's a truth in that is deeply resonant on a soul level for you. And so I think that an identifier of this is that experience where your body responds to truth, or let's say warnings or danger, or go this way or go that way, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I've definitely experienced that, where somebody has said something about their life that I found really sad, say, and just burst out crying just because the empathy I suppose I have for them, or it's just too much to be able to hide it.
Yeah.
But isn't that kind of like the danger thing is, if you go back to when we were Neanderthals, we had to have a heightened sense of danger, and we haven't shaken that. And the other thing that humans appear to really enjoy, which hopefully works for this podcast, is stories. And that's how we get people to buy into us. And the most engaging people in the world are the people who can tell the best stories.
Yeah.
So if somebody tells me the same piece of news, so one's a good storyteller and the other isn't, I cry for one and not for the other.
Sure.
Yeah. Does that have it? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I mean, it does. It makes perfect sense. And I just want to go back to something that you said of like, we haven't been able to shake our bodies of that danger. And also, I think that there's a piece that's being missed there is that our bodies have innate wisdom. There are antennas in the world to navigate our earthly experiences and warn us. Like, it's, if you get close to the edge of a cliff and your body kind of sinks, like, whoosh, you get that
Mm.
feeling in your body. It's like, back up. This is too close, right? So our bodies have these innate warning bells and signals that if we're truly tapped in, they're an everyday occurrence for each and every one of us. We just haven't really dropped into the fact that it's part of our wisdom that we were created with. We just forgot how to listen.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned spirituality there. Do you believe in God or a God or kind of religion?
Yeah. I was raised in a very religious culture. And I also felt really deeply abused by religion in my home. And so for me, I believe in the magic of the universe. I believe that there is a force greater than ourselves out there. I believe that there's something that is always guiding and protecting us if we'll listen to it. For me, nature is my church. When I get in nature, I really feel at home. I'm able to think clearly. I love hiking and just getting lost out in nature. And so it isn't so much for me of this ethereal being, but more so a collective consciousness of sorts.
Okay. And when you say you're abused by religion, what does that mean?
Yeah, so I was raised Mormon, baby of 9 children,
Okay.
and there was a lot of abuse that happened within our house, emotional, physical, sexual abuse. And, the church was certainly aware of a lot of that abuse, but would never intervene. And in fact, in a lot of ways, concealed that abuse. Um, and so now part of my work today is to really expose some of the abuses that are happening within organized religions and help bring that, um, just awareness and also accountability and responsibility of those in authority that are actually concealing some of these abuses.
Wow. I'm
Yeah.
really sorry to hear that.
Thank you. I
And
mean, it's
that's
created
a
who I
horrific
am
thing to go
today, and
through, obviously.
I'm really grateful for the experience now.
Why do you think that's such a common thread in certainly the Catholic religion in Ireland, the Mormon religion there, countless religions? Why do you think that seems to be so common?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak for Mormonism because I grew up in it. And I think a lot of it is women are stripped of their autonomy and also the suppression of sexuality, desire, and the conformity. I think breeds this, it's like whatever is taboo almost becomes somewhat heightened sexually, I would say, for some. And I think that, another big component of this is that if we're not bringing it into the light and really calling it out, you know, it continues to fester. And so until we shine a light on the problem of what's happening, the abuse is going to continue. And so I think that's part of, my quest in this lifetime is truly let's shine a light on it. It's not about to bring down these organizations, but invite them into the conversation and the solution of what do we do with all of it. I mean, the statistics are alarming. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men have been sexually abused. And yet we're
Is
not
that in the
talking.
Mormon religion or just in general?
That's collectively.
Wow.
And so it's like, why do we have this massive mental health crisis and we're not talking about it? When are we going to start talking about the fact that we have a mental health crisis on our hands and we do have influence in how to solve it? But because it's happening in these big organizations, we continue to, it continues to stay hidden and accepted.
Yeah. What was it like growing up in a house of 9 children?
Well, it was really all the things, I would say. I was a baby, and when I became 16, I became pregnant, and I went to go have an abortion. And my parents took me to the bishop's house, and before I was able to have an abortion, and he just said, there's a place where we send girls like you that have sinned, essentially. And they shipped me to an all-girls school in Provo, Utah. And when it was time to give birth to my son, I begged and pleaded to come back home and be with my parents. And finally, they acquiesced. And after I gave birth to my son, my parents, I had really severe complications, and my parents had called a family to come and adopt him. And so when I came out of emergency surgery after giving birth to him, here was this family sitting there holding my son, ready to take him. And I, kind of went into hysterics, and the nurse had the wherewithal to take my baby and put him back in my arms. And I ended up keeping my son. There's a lot of details to that. And when he was 9 months old, my parents came to me and said, the bishop of the church would like to see you again. And so the bishop then told me, I've had a vision from God, and God has told me that this child is not meant to be with you. And at 9 months old, my son was then adopted out through the influence of not only my faith, but my family. And so growing up in our household was a mixed bag of a lot of extreme abuse and also a lot of laughter and joy. I mean, my family used humor as a way to really bypass the tremendous amount of pain that I think we all were in, inclusive of my parents, who really hadn't done their healing. And so, it was filled with both laughter and joy, and a tremendous amount of duality and the abuse that also happened in our household.
And were they abusing you?
They
parents?
were. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And were they continuing a cycle from their parents?
Exactly. I mean, it's intergenerational, right? And I love the saying, as we've kind of seen on social media today, that there's someone in the family that will break that chain of intergenerational trauma and actually speak out. And for me, it's been a really profound path to actually decide to speak out against those who are abusing others. And, through that, I have my memoir coming out, and also a 3-part docuseries where it exposes my family and my parents. And, they were at the hands of this, but there's also an opportunity and invitation for people to heal and to find a path to healing. And so for that, I'm so grateful to be a voice for change.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It really is. Wow. When the abuse was happening, did you speak to your brothers and sisters?
Oh my goodness. I think in our childhood, we all were a part of it. We were witnessing it, collectively. I mean, all of us were being abused. And so I don't think we even needed to breath it to each other, because we were witnessing it of each other. And so it wasn't as though the abuse was a secret to all of us. I think that, child abuse is something that we really need to speak about more. And what's alarming is that it's happening everywhere, and closer to us than we even imagine.
Yeah. The other thing, as you were telling your story there, that I was thinking was, like, this sounds like something that happened in the 40s or something, and, like,
right?
How lucky we are that the world has changed, but you're certainly not 100.
No, And I'm one of millions, absolute millions that this has happened to. And that's why I'm so excited to share my story with the world and start to talk about it more publicly and, get on more podcasts and share the truth of what's happening so that people can find a path to healing, so they can find the courage to share their stories, whether it be privately or publicly. But I believe that through storytelling and through advocacy, we start to heal. And so, I think that's something that you really dialed into, as you said, when you created this podcast, that, storytelling is how we relate to others and their pain and trauma, and how we find our path to our own healing. Whether it's just being seen by feeling, like we can relate to someone else, or to hear someone else's harrowing journey that gives us the strength and hope and courage to continue on. Yeah.
When was the first time you told somebody, that wouldn't have known that you were being abused or had been abused?
I love this question. You have such great questions. So many people don't even ask these questions, so it's really fun. The first time I spoke about my abuse publicly, I was asked to speak at an event, and they had asked me to speak just a couple days beforehand. And for me, it was just a full body yes. And in the audience,
did they know you'd been abused, or was that the subject of?
They knew that I had had some abuse, but not to the extent of my story. And it was the first time that I ever publicly spoke out about it and started to share my story out loud. And someone in the audience reached out to me and she said, I know a good memoir when I hear one. And she happened to be a literary agent for female voices. And it was like one of the most, and so, that to me circles back to the magic of the universe, our intuition, it's such a great example of, I listened to my intuition, which told me yes to share my story in this forum. And from that, I got my first book deal, and never in a million years did I think I would be on this path of writing my memoir and also doing a film as well. So it's just such a beautiful invitation to, continue to support others that have also been abused.
Yeah. So and those, the book and the film are obviously huge mediums to get your story out there and to help other people who may have gone through the same thing. But on that day when you stood up to tell your story to, countless strangers, were you scared? Were you nervous?
I still get nervous telling it, especially on a stage.
So I mean, this is like anybody who speaks in front of a crowd is going to get nervous. You're telling a story that's incredibly personal and has so many, as you mentioned, taboos, and people don't talk about this.
Yeah.
But you're doing it for the first time. Like, tell me how that felt.
Yeah, thank you. It was nerve-wracking, but what was interesting is I sat down and I wrote out what I wanted to say, and the words were there, the message was there. And as I shared my story for the first time, of course, I was shaking like a leaf. And, I think for me, my persona in life was always perfectionism and being so eloquent and put together, that to feel like I was somewhat of a fraud because I had concealed all this abuse that had happened to me, that I had a child at the age of 16. I mean, people didn't even know I had a son. I think that was in large part a lot of my fear. And then, I think too, to expose my parents, because it was at the hands of my parents, and my parents were still in my life. And so how do we reconcile that? And I think, just to take it a step further, I think a lot of people carry the secrets of their abuse for years and years and years because they're terrified because the people that abuse them are still in their life. And what's going to happen to their families? What's going to happen to the dysfunction that they've created, that at least now there's some stability around it, and they're not ready to completely, implode their lives in a way. And so they carry those secrets for years until it manifests at times in, disease and other things. I often use the saying, we're only as sick as our secrets, and I do believe we are only as sick as our secrets.
And what were the repercussions for your parents, and even just the impact on your family?
As I said earlier, I lost a sister in 2017 to a fentanyl overdose. And then just over a year ago, I lost a sister to suicide.
Wow.
And I hate to say it in this way, but I think in some regard, my parents are living their own worst nightmare, because the level of abuse that we experienced has manifested in their children really suffering. And, I often say, for me, if I didn't have time or money, I don't know that I would have been alive. I too was suicidal for several years, just not knowing how to find my way out of the depression and anxiety and things like that. And, I wholeheartedly believe that psychedelics saved my life. They allowed me a safe space to go into the past of what had happened to me, into the layers and layers and years of abuse, and be able to unpack it in a way that was really, really meaningful and productive, so that I could move on and have a life of joy and freedom and abundance.
Did you go straight to psychedelics, or did you try kind of conventional counseling?
Oh, I tried everything first. I mean, years and years of therapy, but it wasn't really moving the needle. And I think for me, talk therapy is an hour and then it's like, time's up. And to really get people to break down all their walls, really get to the depth of their vulnerability, share their most intimate secrets that they've never told anyone, I feel like traditional talk therapy fails the patient in that way, and just not by no other reason other than time and resources and the environment. And so I feel like psychedelics can take you on a journey of really processing lifetimes within one day of the experience. And please don't misunderstand. I don't think that psychedelics are for everyone. I think you really need to be called to these indigenous medicines. And if you're called to work with them, I know the healing properties and power that can happen if you're with someone who is safe and skilled as a proficient facilitator.
Are they regulated?
In some parts of the, right now they're going through clinical trials for legalization.
Okay.
There's a few states that they are legal right now, different psychedelics. And then down in South America, it's pretty readily available there as well. There's a lot of centers because it is not regulated and it is legal in those areas.
Oh, and what are like you've told me about the positives, what are the dangers? Or I'm presuming that if it's not regulated, there's concerns that the medical community has.
Yeah. One, there's a lot of contraindications. And, the low hanging fruit of contraindications are prior psychosis. If you're on pharmaceuticals, so SSRIs, antidepressants, etc., your body needs to be clear of those substances. Otherwise, it can be really dangerous in their contraindications. I also think
what's a contraindication?
A contraindication is something that would not be in harmony with doing these medicines, that it would be dangerous to actually combine these substances. So it would be contraindicated, meaning it wouldn't be indicated to actually be used in concert with these indigenous medicines. So ketamine is a psychedelic that is wildly used now in the States and other places as well as a legal form of a therapeutic tool for depression, anxiety, eating disorders, etc. And it's one of the only psychedelics that someone can be on certain medications and also use this psychedelic as a tool to actually titrate off some of their meds.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, like, powerful stuff if ketamine's involved.
Yeah.
When you were like we've kind of jumped around from when you were young to when you're to today, basically. What, you're obviously still young, don't get me wrong. Like, what brought you joy in your life as you were kind of growing up through your teens and your 20s?
Yeah. Well, I have always been into music. I play the violin and also the piano. And so it's rare that I don't have music playing often in my house and around me. It's a way that I connect to my body and my soul. It's music for me invokes emotion. And so it's like dependent upon the mood that you're in, you can really pull out, your laughter, your play, your dance, somber music can pull out the grief and the sorrow, etc. So music has always been a catalyst for me. I love skiing and tennis and hiking and being in nature as much as I can. So really have enjoyed an active lifestyle. And, it's just important that being healthy. And then also, I love to cook and love to be in community. So I love hosting friends at my home. I always have for years of really being together and keeping a tight circle of friends around me that are my soul family, for sure.
I was just about to ask, because like, friends must be hugely important to you, given like your traditional family structure has been destroyed, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that just because we're born into families doesn't mean that that's our only family. I have such a beautiful extended network of a soul family that just means the world to me. And so, yeah, my friends and community are everything to me.
And is it possible to make a living from, I suppose, your psychic powers?
I have not tried to quote unquote make a living off my psychic powers. Is that what you said? Psychic powers? Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of mediums out there and a lot of really gifted psychics and things like that. There's a lot of charlatans in the space, but I firmly believe there's a lot of people doing incredible work in this space. I worked with a woman once who was actually helping the FBI solve murder cases because she could see. She had such incredible vision to see images of what people look like and things like that. And so I wholeheartedly believe that there's a lot of people out there making a very incredible and sizable income off of their abilities in this realm. For me, I really use my abilities with my clients to help just really tap into what's going on. And there's a few different ways that I use my abilities, whether it be that I can hear messages about someone that I'm working with, or almost can see like a movie being played of certain scenes. And then I also just can feel it through felt sense in my body. And so I use and tap into those powers to really be able to connect with people in my world.
Okay, so what is your job now? Like, if I was to Google, what would I Google to become a client of yours?
Yeah, so I'm a trauma-informed coach. My background's in spiritual psychology. I trained under Gabor Mate. I have a lot of different trainings in trauma. And so I also lead psychedelic retreats as well. And so, and facilitating using psychedelic medicine. So someone could reach out to me and work with me individually as a trauma-informed coach. And for me, I believe that until we heal some of these adverse childhood experiences, it's holding us back from the life that we want to have. And I believe that these medicines can be a catalyst to our healing in such a powerful and beautiful way. So, it's not a one-stop shop where you have one amazing journey and all of a sudden all of the world's problems are solved, right? I really look at it that, psychedelic experiences are 20% and 80% is what you do afterwards and your ability to really integrate that experience. So it's something that, it's an opportunity to just, imagine this. Let's say you've lived your entire life looking out at a window, your front window in your house, and you've looked out, but you've had the curtains drawn all these years. And so imagine doing psychedelic medicines and all of a sudden it's like pulling the curtain back where you have like a 360-degree view of being able to look at your life and your life experiences with this full, broad spectrum. And so I think that's the beauty in these medicines, is that it expands our ability to see things from different perceptual states, to go back and revisit some of our earlier childhood experiences that we're still living traumatic patterns from these nuanced experiences that we have that we may not even have memories of anymore. And to be able to clear that so you can live a life of freedom and joy.
So you could, like, if I did this with you, I could end up seeing a memory, or I could see something that I didn't know had happened, but had happened to me. So it was a memory that was in my head, but I couldn't recall it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I first did my psychedelic experience, that's what happened to me. It's a term called disassociation, where neurologically, if you have, I'm sure you've heard before of stories of someone getting in a car accident or a skiing accident or something, and they break a leg and they don't have any memory of what happened and they didn't feel any pain when it happened. It's kind of our brain's coping strategy, because if we really felt that level of pain, it could kill us, right? Okay. And so neurologically, we're able to kind of bypass that by a coping strategy called disassociation, where we completely remove ourselves from the equation and we may not even remember the experience, and it keeps us safe and same in some form. And that works well. It's a fabulous coping strategy until it doesn't. So, it's one of those where, to go back, typically there's something that happens with a lot of people as well, is they get in their 30s, 40s, 50s, they've raised their kids, they have a stable income, and all of a sudden they start having memories come back of earlier childhood experiences. And why is that happening? It's like all of a sudden the brain feels safe enough to start to unlock some of that. Or they have a death of a loved one or a confluence of events that happen, right? And so psychedelics can just unlock that part of the subconscious so we can take a peek and look inside to see what are some of these earlier experiences that we've had that are holding us back in our life.
Wow. That's like fascinating.
Here, let me use a little example. So let's say you're 5 years old and you're walking down the street with your mom. And all of a sudden, you're like, Mommy, here's an ice cream parlor. Can we go in? So you and your mom go in, you both get an ice cream. You have this really tall stacked ice cream of your favorite mint chip and whatever else that you love. And you walk back out and you're walking on the street back with your mom, but it's 115 degrees out. It is a blazing summer hot day. And all of a sudden your ice cream starts dripping all over your hand, and your mom grabs your ice cream and she starts licking around it before it makes this big mess. And you go into hysterics. And from that inciting incident, you create this narrative for your life that My parents don't trust me. I'm incapable of taking care of things on my own. Nobody loves me, whatever it is. And so it's not always the big T traumas like sexual abuse, physical abuse, death of a loved one, alcoholic parent, etc. Sometimes it's these small nuanced experiences that happen repeatedly in our childhood that create this narrative that we are living out, for years to come. So let's say, you were bullied on the playground and you're like, oh, that happened when I was in the 5th grade. It's not that big a deal. But yet you've always played it safe in your life because you're afraid of being attacked again the way you were when you were younger. But that memory isn't really at the forefront. So what psychedelics can do is we can go back and visit these earlier childhood memories and detach the energy that's been stored in us for years so that we no longer are playing out those patterns of protecting ourselves because of something that happened when we were 5. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah.
I think that like the bullying thing, I think is something a lot of people will relate to
Absolutely.
because
Yeah.
kids are kids, and it just happens so frequently. But yeah, the
Yeah.
impact that it has on your life as you grow older, as you say, may never leave you. And is it about then becoming? Is it about having like a better understanding or becoming more comfortable with the things that have happened?
I think that the first step to healing is awareness. And so if an earlier childhood experience happened, but you don't have awareness of it, but you're still acting out negative patterns because of it, the second that we bring it into our conscious awareness, we can heal it and clear it from being a factor in our lives. But it takes that level of conscious awareness for us to fully heal. And so that's one of the beautiful powers of these medicines is that it brings the unconscious into the conscious awareness. So then we can work with a skilled provider to really help heal those earlier childhood experiences. And it doesn't have to always be earlier childhood experiences. I have dear friends that have lost loved ones. I've lost loved ones. And to be able to go and really do the healing work around their passing. And so many people have been through divorces or lost a child or lost a job, and those experiences can be really traumatic, right?
Yeah, yeah. Plenty of food for thought.
Well, we can always do round 2 and continue.
Yeah, exactly.
We can take you on your first psychedelic experience, and then you can share that with your community.
Yeah, wow. So I know plenty of people who'd like to be there for that.
Yeah.
Just going back to the Mormon religion and the kind of reputation that it has, say in Ireland, where I would know very little about it, but the Book of Mormon comes to the theatre here, or I think there's a Real Housewives of Mormon
of Salt Lake City
or something. Yeah, something related to the Mormons. Like, when you see that, how does that make you feel, or what do you think?
Yeah, I left the church when I was 16. So I knew after my son was adopted that there was something so grossly wrong with, let's take it all the way back before I got pregnant. Why was I removed from sex ed and unable to talk about the birds and the bees in school? Like, there's something so wrong. Why are we hiding our sexuality? Why are we hiding, learning about how you get pregnant, our own bodies? Like, there's such a disconnect there. And so I have to say that because I left the church at such a young age, I didn't get married within the church like a lot of my friends. I didn't continue with the doctrine. I've been out of the church more than I've been in the church my adult life. But nevertheless, there's a lot of obviously I had a lot of pain within the church growing up that really shaped me in so many ways. And I think some of the biggest responses that I get, and I've worked with a lot of clients who have left the church and that really needed some support and understanding. And one of the things is, hey, if you leave the church, God is only available to Mormons. Like, if you're not Mormon, then there's only one true God and he belongs to the Mormons. And I just think, quite frankly, that's BS. Like, we all have access to that. We all have a higher power, God as we know it, spirit, etc. And I think that there's just a lot of opportunity for growth that doesn't include the dogma of some of these organized religions like Mormonism.
Yeah. Are you in touch with your son now?
I am not. I think the experience for both of us when he came to live with me was pretty traumatic. I think I was naive in thinking that I had the skills that I needed to really go through that reunification together. And
Sorry,
and
when did he come to
when
live
he
with
was
you?
18, so that was
Oh, wow.
oh heavens, we're 11, 12 years now. And so I think that, too, I didn't anticipate cracking open a lot of earlier childhood abuse memories. And so that was something that really happened when he came back to live with me, which was incredibly traumatic that I couldn't have predicted. But I think that, the psyche works in that way. It's like, what's that inciting incident that cracks open all the things that we've disassociated from? And that certainly was the moment for me.
Wow. So how did he end up coming back to live with you at 18?
He had reached out to me, and, I think for me, there was nothing that I wanted more than to be reconnected with him. And it was interesting when he was adopted, the bishop of the church at the time said, he'll come back to know you as his mother one day. And I think I hung on to those words, and maybe they were false words from the bishop to try to give me comfort with all this jockeying that was going around and all of that. But most certainly, for those listening, watch out for the book, The Church of All Good Things, because you'll get the deep, in-depth story in my memoir as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I've seen from your website you have an orphans club. Tell me about the orphans club.
I do. So in 2017, this is like, of course, this lights me up. This is part of my passion. So in 2017, after my sister had passed, the same year, my best friend died and my sister-in-law died of all sudden and tragic deaths, just back to back. I mean, it was one right after the other. And I wrote to a girlfriend of mine and I said, please tell me what to go do. I'm worried. I don't know where to place this grief. And if I don't do something with it, I'm worried that I can turn to drinking or drugs or what have you. And I really want to use this in a way where I can go be of service. And she said, pack your bags and go to Africa. And so I did. I ended up packing my bags and headed to Africa. And when I arrived there, I had written to this woman and said, I'm coming to Africa, put me to work. If you have any projects, I'm your girl. And when I got there, this choir of angels came out, these children singing songs of welcome. And here I thought I was going to go be of service to them. And what I found in Africa is that this family literally sang me back to life through their songs of hope and joy and resilience, that here they had lost their parents to HIV and AIDS, and yet they could come out shining and abundant and radiant and happy. And through that experience, I came home and filed a 501c3 and started supporting them and have been since 2018. And it's been one of the greatest joys of my life is, I tried to have more children in my adult life after my son and was unable to carry a child. I had multiple miscarriages. And you never know how the universe is going to correct some of our heart's desires. And for me, never in a million years did I think I would be a mother to 150 children in Africa. And so I think it's one of the gifts that if we can get out of our own way and just surrender to the magic that's out there, because it's all around us. I could have wallowed in my grief that I didn't have a child for years and years and years and carried that heartbreak, or I could open myself up to a new realm of possibility that, now I get to work out of Africa and support these incredible children there, and to really give back to a community that's creating a sustainable future.
So what do you do for them?
So our goal, none of the children in Africa are adopted out. We really want them to stay within the community. So we take all of our students from whatever age that we get them, and we try to take them all the way through university. Some of the children aren't poised to go through university, and their skill set is better suited becoming a chef or a seamstress or a basket weaver or things like that. I mean, just today in our culture, not everyone is designed to go to college, and really their gifts come in different ways. We want to educate and provide skills and resources for every child so they can bring it back to our community and give back, so we can scale and really create sustainability. And so that is really our goal, is educating every child that comes through our program and giving them the best opportunity that they can for growth.
Amazing.
Yeah.
We had I had a couple on a number of episodes ago who did exactly that, and set up a charity. They basically said the Christmas presents they were giving as between their family, they would put that aside and support, I think it was 5 children in Malawi to go through primary school, and that was their main aim, was just to get them through primary school.
Yeah,
because the girls especially were just dropping out, and the kids just wouldn't get it. So the kids then started getting into secondary school, and they thought, "Oh, how are we going to? We can't just leave them now."
Mm-hmm.
So they funded them then through secondary school, and now they're into university as well, and it's just it's an incredible ability for people to see exactly what you're talking about, to be able to see past their own lives and realize there's people in much worse situations.
Yeah.
And when you do see the potential that you're talking about for these children to change their lives, to change their lives themselves, not, to have a house built for them just because they fall under a certain charity or whatever, but to put them into a classroom where it's up to them to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you see them, you're being empowered and growing, it's an incredible experience for them, and it's an incredible thing that you're doing.
Yeah, I'm going back in August. One of our girls is getting married, and it's just so incredible to watch the journey and their growth and exploration, and then how they build their own families and are able to give back. It is just the greatest joy. And if anyone's interested in kind of seeing what we're doing in Africa, our website is orphansclub.org. And just so grateful to be a part of this organization and be able to give back in some small way to those in need, for sure.
Yeah, it's brilliant. One thing you mentioned there was, like, before you started talking about Orphans Club, about like suffering the grief, and you've had so much grief and trauma.
Mm-hmm.
How did you not turn to drink and drugs, or did you turn to drink and drugs, or the typical things that a lot of people who have suffered so much have turned to for comfort?
Yeah. I have a family riled in addiction. Several of my siblings have gone to rehab. Both my sisters had been to rehab that had passed. And I certainly had my moments with it. It's a how would you say it? It's a coping strategy that millions and millions of people use every day. It's just been socially acceptable. You know, I was fortunate that I didn't like the feeling of being out of my body, you know, and so I think I had the ability to control it better than others, and I'm highly, highly sensitive. So, and at times when I felt like I'm getting a little too close to the edge, I had the course correct, where I think others don't have that. And I'm grateful that I had that governor within me to kind of stop and reassess. And I think too that, you know, we all, each and every one of us has the opportunity to change and channel our pain into purpose. And for me, I have always been purpose driven. And so I think it's something that if we can be of service and get out of our own way, and it's hard to say because I know I'm speaking to the person who's dealt with treatment resistant depression, who's laid in bed and can't even imagine getting out in the world and being of service to anyone other than themselves. But I think that if we are able to give back in some way, it actually changes us neurologically. It helps fire and wire those, neuro pathways, and healing is possible. And I think that's something, one of my big messages in the world is that regardless of circumstance, regardless of what you've been through, healing absolutely is possible.
It's incredible. Thanks so much, Patricia, for telling me your story. It's like listening to you talk. I can't imagine the things that you've endured, and a lot of it is because a lot of that, I think, is because you're so calm. You just like, I don't think there's another adjective. Like, you just seem so calm and so kind of controlled and I don't know, maybe at peace, that it's kind of inspiring to see, because you know I've certainly haven't had a traumatic life, so I don't necessarily need to see it, but I do know friends of mine who have been through things that are terrible.
Yeah.
And to, like, you just, that last bit where you're saying that healing is possible no matter what. And if they have listened to you from the beginning, then they know that you've obviously gone through that journey yourself. And I think this is kind of the core part of why I do this podcast, is because people listening can anonymously listen to you tell your story. They can pretend they haven't heard it, but they can change their lives as well. And they can take steps to, if it's healing or if it's, just in service to others. Like, that's such a powerful thing. So, thank you for reaching out, and thank you for telling your story.
Yeah. Thank you for that reflection. It means a lot to me. And I think your reflection is a testament to the amount of work that I've done. I recently just made a post on social media that said, I am only this at peace in comparison to the amount of violence, and so it's like my peace is a direct reflection of the severity of what I lived through and how hard I work to transform and transmute the amount of trauma that I did go through. And I believe that it's not that I'm special or different from anyone else. It's that I know that I'm here to support others on their healing journey. And it is absolutely 100% through lived experience. And so I'm grateful to be here. And I'm so grateful for these rich conversations and people like you that can bring these stories to the world.